welcome back to the Roots Run Deep podcast. My name is Rafa, and as many of you guys may know, we have a co-host, Kiara, and right now she's not here with us in this space, but she is with the Richmond Art Park Coalition doing the retreat. But the last episode on December 2024, we did mention that we wanted to have more guests for our podcast for the year of 2025. So that is what we have today. Today we have the Watershed program here with us, and I'm going to have themselves introduce themselves, just name, pronouns, positions, and where you work.
Hi, my name is Paola, she, her, and I'm part of the Watershed crew and co-manager in the crew.
Yeah, I'm Nathan. I am the director of the Watershed Restoration programs at Urban Tilth. Use he, him pronouns.
Yo, I'm Solwazi. I am one of the other co-managers for the Watershed Restoration program, and I use he, him programs as well. He, him pronouns as well.
Awesome. Welcome to the Roots from Deep podcast. And, you know, I feel like sometimes the Watershed program is kind of put like on the backboard. Not a lot of people know what Watershed means. So I was wondering if I could also get one of you guys to tell me what Watershed does or what it means to you guys. You guys could also just go one by one if you guys would like, because I know Watershed could probably mean different things to different people.
Yeah, I guess is the question of like what, or like, should we talk about what a watershed is maybe to start?
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know if one of y'all want to give that a shot.
Sure, yeah. For me, like, the definition of a watershed is basically like an area where basically if you just put a drop of water, all that, it's going to funnel into one place. So you can, sometimes it's a very big area, it can be one watershed, and just depending on the landscape, all that water is going to make its way into the same place. So you can think kind of as the San Pablo Bay watershed. All of the creeks in our area are all funneling into that bay. So there's big watersheds, there's small watersheds. It's kind of a very broad term, and it can be relevant in many different spaces at many scales.
Yeah, I think it's like kind of like organizing land from the point of view of water, right? So like how is the water flowing, and how is the water kind of collecting itself from tributaries into rivers into the bay, and recognizing that like, okay, if we care about this particular water resource, obviously like, water is life. We all rely on water, and, human communities more than human communities all rely on water. If we want to take care of, we're close to Wildcat Creek in North Richmond and San Pablo Creek. If we want to take care of those resources, we have to think about all the land that drains into those creeks. And if we want to take care of the bay, we got to think about all the rivers and creeks that drain into the bay, and all that. If there's pollution on the land that drains into those rivers and into the bay, those rivers and bay can't be healthy. We can't just focus on like this stretch of Wildcat Creek in order to keep the creek healthy. We got to think about all the land that drains into it. And so it's kind of like an organizing principle for land, and also for thinking about like, communities or whatever, thinking outside of like traditional like political boundaries or something of organizing spaces of like, well, we all have this kind of shared responsibility and this shared reliance on this water source. So that sort of brings us together in this way that is really like defined by the water that we can't, our political systems can't rearrange. We're sort of required to think about water in that way, because that's how the water flows and how it organizes itself. But then, I don't know, maybe. Go ahead.
I'll just add, like, for me, a watershed is like, it's just important to take care of the water, because it's all coming through different communities, and it's all going to drain out to the bay, and everything that comes before it affects everything afterwards. Mm-hmm. And so, that's why I'll just say it's important to take care of your watershed, because it affects everything.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool. I guess I didn't know much about watershed, what watershed meant, or what a watershed is. I feel like when I was in high school, we had a presentation from the Watershed Project, and to me, it just looked very cool. It was a big old diorama of like how water flows and stuff like that. But I never understood the purpose of it. I just thought it was cool. So sure. So I guess my next question, since you guys are focusing on how the water flows and how we should be mindful of that element, right? What are some of the focuses that you guys do to reassure that the watershed is being maintained, or it's still a thing that we're seeing?
Yeah, so since kind of like we talked about, the watershed is such a broad thing, such a large scale thing, and there's so many different landscapes and ecosystems that go into the larger watershed. Like, our work is pretty broad, so we're one of the programs that has all these different sites. Like, we're bouncing around doing different things. Sometimes we're like right on the edge of the creek planting native plants. Sometimes we're up on a hill controlling erosion that contributes to sedimentation, which is related to water. Sometimes we're removing invasive plants. Sometimes we're doing fire mitigation, and it just all connects in some way. It's not always so clear, the connection that's there, but there's so many things that affect the watershed. So our work has just kind of grown to try and heal all aspects of the watershed.
Okay, yes. Our focuses when working includes like removing a lot of invasive species like Himalayan blackberry, invasive grasses. And so the idea is that we want to take out a lot of invasives so that the space can go back to like its natural like state, what it was before all these invasive species got there. And so so it's important to like put in these native plants to help restore the soil. It helps with wildlife and biodiversity of plants. Like, you don't want just like 2-3 invasive plants just taking over. Like, you want to leave space for all these native plants to like grow and like restore, basically.
Yeah, we want like diverse communities of native plants rather than these like kind of monocultures of species that tend to like really reduce the resilience and don't provide as much habitat. And I often think about the work, especially Paola and Solwazi lead this the watershed restoration field crew, and I think there's a few different elements of the watersheds program generally, but for this crew in particular, a lot of work, the way that I think about it is like it's kind of relationship based, like land stewardship, and so a big part is there's, I think, like restoration is kind of this, it's kind of a complicated thing, right? Historically, like restoration is sort of thought of as like, okay, well, the ecosystem has been damaged, and we're gonna undo that damage. We're gonna sort of turn back the clock. And I think in practice, that's really difficult to do. You can't actually go back in time, and the ecosystems are changing naturally on their own. So restoration maybe can't achieve that, like totally turning back the clock and undoing all the damage. But what it can do is it helps like human communities like re-enter into relationship with the natural world in a way that's kind of like productive and reciprocal and mutually beneficial. And so in the same way, like I think your point about the watersheds work sort of being on the side of Urban Tilth's work or something, or like a little bit different from the other Urban Tilth programs, is like totally something we've experienced too. And I think Paola and Solwazi have done a lot of cool work to try to like integrate it too. But I do think like one thing that really brings it all together for me is the idea that like when we're farming, we have this like reciprocal relationship with the land and with this plant. We're taking care of the soil, we're nourishing this plant, and that plant takes care of us, right? And the same relationship can exist on creeks and waterways and natural spaces, right? We take care of the soil, we take care of the land, the water, the air, and those spaces can nourish us sort of in return. It's not quite as direct as like, oh, I'm eating this kale, I'm putting this kale in my mouth, but the relationship is still there. You know, humans, we rely on those natural spaces and can care for those natural spaces. And so, yeah, a lot of the work generally that I think the crew is doing is like kind of reestablishing those relationships, you know, like we do some training programs. Obviously this crew is out there really regularly doing this work and getting to know these spaces really well and trying to understand, you know, like how can we heal this space and how can we nourish this space and how can we like cultivate like a reciprocal relationship with this space. And then also a big part of the native planting stuff is restoring those relationships between the plants and the pollinators and the plants and the soil microorganisms and stuff. So there's both like human to ecosystem relationships and then relationships that are being restored within the ecosystem. That is sort of at the core of our work. And it's kind of also why we oftentimes refer to the program. Sometimes the program is referred to as we call it the Basins of Relations program, which is a term that our friend Brock Dolman, who's at Occidental Arts and Ecology Center, came up with. Basin being like the watershed. It's like a big sink basin draining to a single endpoint. And then the relations being like the sort of critical relationships that like support a healthy watershed.
It's beautiful. Yeah, right now listening to how you guys are just restoring and bringing back like native plants and everything, it just makes me feel like thinking about like how a lot of the times when we're doing the work outside of just Watershed, like for example, just transition work or even like farm stand, like some of the crews are trying to decolonize a lot of the ways that things run right now, right? So I feel like, for example, farm stand is trying to get healthy foods to people instead of having it still be a food desert in our community. So it's really cool to hear that you guys are restoring. A lot of the time, I feel like when we're doing the work, we tend to, and this is a thing that I hear often when we're at the Climate Justice Alliance spaces. It's we fight the bad and try to rebuild the new. And I feel like a lot of the time we focus too much. We hyper focus on fighting the bad and not put too much work into rebuilding the new. And I feel like you guys are tackling both, you know, all at once. And that's beautiful. I feel like it's rare when you're able to do that all at once, you know. So it takes a lot of organizing, which is really important.
Yeah. When you said decolonize, I kind of brought to mind like also just so obviously we're in relationship with the land and the water through our work, but also like reconnecting our community to those spaces. And a lot of the creeks that we work in are urban creeks. They're overgrown, which is like those invasive species are taking over that space and covering things up to the point where sometimes people don't even know the creeks are there. A lot of those spaces are fenced in. And so through our work, we're trying to open these spaces back up to the community, like clearing out those invasive plants, like opening up some of the canopy, putting in like inviting plants that people will be drawn to so they can notice those spaces and then just start to reap the benefits, because there's just so much like chaos and negativity going on in some of these communities, and natural spaces bring so much beauty and peace and like mental clarity and all the things that have like helped me through a lot of stuff in my life. People need access to that kind of stuff, so that's also a big part of the work too.
Yeah, I think it's totally true that like we think about environmental injustice as often in terms of the bad things, you know, like air pollution, water pollution, all those, you know, negative impacts. But yeah, there's also like differential access to the good things of nature, and that's also a part of environmental injustice. That these spaces can be really, as Solwazi's saying, just like really nourishing for all of us, and that sort of nourishment and relationship to these like fundamental healing sacred resources, you know, like the land, the water, the soil, that access is not equally distributed, and for, you know, all sorts of reasons that we can get into, but yeah, that is also the loss of the positive things is also like a form of environmental injustice that we're trying to fight against.
Yeah, and the work you guys do is like really important, I believe, for our environment, because I feel like Watershed here could look different somewhere else, like in Florida or, so it's really cool to think how you guys are focusing on what the original state of the land was, So without a doubt, it is important, the work that you guys are doing. But how do you guys get funding for it?
Yeah. Good question. So a big part of the way that this program started was appreciating that, especially in North Richmond in particular, but obviously in West County in general, that there was this sort of, historically, like the community has been reliant on these extractive industries for, maybe less so now, but Chevron refineries, chemical plants along the shoreline, things like this. The community was reliant upon these like extractive industries for jobs and well-being, and I think there's been a long-standing need to develop like kind of opportunities and careers that are in fields that are conducive to community health and supportive of community health, and so there's that need of like, okay, we need career-based opportunities for young folks from Richmond, from North Richmond, to support their community, support the environment, and then there's also this this state of things that exists where like really like if you look at a map of Richmond and West County, like one of the few remaining natural spaces, that's kind of a complicated word, but natural spaces in Richmond, elements of like the pre-colonial landscape are these creeks, right? These little green squiggles through the map. And obviously we have some parks up in the hills, but in Richmond, a lot of the only kind of, pre-colonial landscape we have left are these creek spaces. And a lot of these creek spaces in these urban areas are really important, right? They're all these, like birds and pollinators and plants and stuff are really reliant on these last vestiges of this kind of pre-colonial world, These are like these really essential corridors. And then also the humans, that really like crave and belong in these natural spaces, like really rely on these natural spaces. But those spaces are really heavily impacted, right, by invasive species and pollution. And, this crew works a lot on, Wildcat Creek and San Pablo Creek in North Richmond. And that's right around the corner from the West County dump. And the landfill in it, sometimes people don't want to pay for the landfill, so they just dump it at the creek, so there's all this impact on these urban ecosystems. So the program sort of began because it's like there's sort of this overlap between those two things. There's a need for these kind of green collar employment opportunities and jobs in non-extractive industries. And these creek spaces need care, like these natural spaces need care and support in like kind of long-term and ways. And traditionally, like creek restoration projects get a lot of funding to do big construction, like to move a bunch of earth around, to do a bunch of planting, and then you leave. Like the restoration project ends. There's an implementation phase, and then it ends. And you usually have to maintain it for some period of time. But that really doesn't like work like in practice, like that sort of model where you sort of restore it and then walk away. Like the spaces and a lot of these creek spaces in Richmond have experienced some level of restoration at one point or another, but there's an ongoing need for care and maintenance. And a lot of the cities and municipalities recognize this. And so to answer the question about like how does funding happen, we do get foundation support and do rely on, donors from foundations and individual people. But a lot of this crew is in contract with like Contra Costa County and like the city of Albany and the city of Richmond, East Bay Parks District. And, these organizations that fortunately do understand that like, okay, these spaces need care, and we have, and so like they fortunately do have like kind of an awareness of and a desire to support people, from the community caring for these spaces. And so we've developed kind of relationships with, and then eventually contracts with these land owning agencies, essentially, where they support our time, support and pay this crew to provide this care for these natural spaces. So kind of cobble together a bunch of different sources of funding to hopefully provide increasingly trying to provide living wage employment and things that people can grow into and build careers around these jobs. And so as you mentioned earlier, it means we're kind of bouncing around and caring for different sites, and this crew cares for all these different sites and different days of the week and stuff. But that's the long answer to how does the funding happen.
It's just because also thinking about a lot of the other stuff you guys do, you guys have the youth fellowship, right? Or apprenticeship. I feel like it's really cool to see the work you guys put into not just restore these creeks and all these fields, right? Land. And, you guys are also taking time to, nourish the young minds, and I feel like that's really cool. And I was wondering if does funding that ever become a challenge?
Yeah. I mean, I think, it's almost maybe this is cynical of me, but it's almost like anything worth doing is challenging to fund, right? Maybe I don't know. Yeah, it's if it were profitable and easy to fund, then it's happening, But the things that are profitable and easy to fund under capitalism usually aren't the sort of things we want, But I think like I said, even in the environmental stuff, funders often want big before and after pictures. They say, oh, we turned this vacant lot into a garden, and that's some of what Urban Tilth does too. But a lot of what we're doing is nourishing people's, young people from the community to build on the expertise they have about their community and to grow those skills. And so those educational programs can sometimes be a little bit more difficult to fund because, it's not and then the maintenance of these spaces, the care for long-term care for these creek ecosystems is similar to long-term care for our garden spaces. In some ways, a success for the Verde Elementary Garden is here it is in the spring, look how beautiful and abundant, and here's spring 2024, and look at all these things that are coming up, it's so beautiful. And then spring 2025, here it is again doing it looks exactly the same as it did, and that's a huge success that it's being sustained and continuing to grow produce or whatever. But sometimes those sorts of things are a little harder to fund. But we do have, we get a lot of amazing support from foundations and stuff, and the education programs definitely can be funded, but do require a lot of effort. And Doria and the fund development team do a lot of work to make that happen.
Definitely. Yeah, and I guess we could pivot to more into challenges. I feel like the work you guys do, I've seen the creeks before, and you guys mentioned earlier, sometimes the dumping happens. What are some other challenges you guys face? Because I know for a while Houses folk were there as well, and I don't know if you guys have any issues with that.
Yeah, so illegal dumping is a big one, and also trash and hazardous materials left behind by houseless community, and fires. Sometimes they have to stay warm, so there's fires, and then just being careful when we're weeding. There's a lot of wildlife in the ground and stuff. And then what's the last one I put here? Oh yeah, and then just getting more North Richmond local community to be involved in coming to volunteer at the creek is another challenge we face too. Just having them build that connection with the creek.
That community engagement.
Yeah.
No, I feel like that's definitely one of the things that a lot of programs face is trying to get community engagement, especially when it's something very important. Sometimes they could look at us and they're just nothing's gonna happen. If we speak up about some certain thing, nothing will change. And it is, I feel like that is one of the biggest challenges that is happening right now in North Richmond, and also just having folk from North Richmond show up. You know, I feel like Urban Tilth has a pretty good name out there, but not a lot of people in our own communities know what we're about. You know, so yeah.
I think sometimes there can be like an element of fear, like a complicated relationship with the natural space, especially when people feel like, oh, it's, you know, there's a lot of complicated feelings around, like the unhoused community that does live at the creek, and I mean, just the unknown, you know, and I think that's like a huge loss, and part of why, you know, so much of our work is kind of relationship based, is like a lot of times what happens in these in environmental injustice impacted communities is that like that relationship to the natural world is sort of skewed and sort of becomes one of like, can I plant in the soil in my yard? Can I breathe the air in my community? You know, it's like all these things that are super fundamental, sacred relationship with the things that sustain us become like twisted and like perverted in some way or whatever. Like now I'm afraid of these things that are supposed to be life sustaining. And so I think, we really want to like get people comfortable out on the creek and bring people out to the creek and make people feel at home in those spaces and nourished by those spaces. But obviously there's a very understandable, like sometimes misgivings or hesitation about getting out there, you know?
Yeah, I think there's also just some skepticism from people like that. There's been different organizations that have come in and out and promised certain things that may or may not have happened. And like some of these people have been there 40, 50, however many years. And so they've seen the cycles of this type of stuff. And like, in my mind, Urban Tilth has been around for a long time, but to them, they might think like, well, this is a pretty new organization. Like, let's see what they actually do. And you can say all these things, but what's going to actually happen? So I think people are just like, they got to feel us out and they got to, you know, see how down we really are. And it's slowly happening. Like people are engaging, and we're getting some more of the older community to show up to our events and hear what we have to say. And it's just like, it's just building trust and making relationships. It's not going to be something that happens overnight. So I think that's a part of it. But also to add, one of the challenges of the work, just it's hard work. That's like probably the number one challenge, is like there's the need for this stuff and someone has to do it, but it isn't easy. So like in the warmer months, like when we're doing fire mitigation, mowing grasses on Albany Hill, like it's hot and we're carrying these heavy weed whackers, hiking up this hill, getting on these uneven slopes. And then in the rainy months when there's a lot of erosion happening, having to get on these slippery hillsides and secure loose soil, and there's just all the need for stuff. But it's tough work. So just making sure that we take care of ourselves and pace ourselves, but we are like so eager to have this great impact. So sometimes you get caught up in that and don't really take care of your body.
Yeah, the crew also just finished this really cool project on Ream Creek, which is historically like flooded the Rollingwood neighborhood which is like I think right by Contra Costa College. And it was really cool. They grew a lot of the plants that got installed, over 500 plants, and like 180 trees got installed on this site, and they re-excavated the channel so that it carries more flood water and hopefully doesn't flood this community. But the crew is like the banks of this creek are like 45-degree angles or maybe steeper, and so the crew is like planting, like hanging on to the bank for dear life while like vertically suspended over this like waterway, trying to plant. And then just to add on too, like shout out Cheryl Lopez is our community engagement manager, and she's doing a lot of cool work to try to like build a community of residents, people from the community who know about all this cool work that the crew is doing. And we've been so glad to have Cheryl on board, and that's like a huge focus of her work, is just like getting people in conversation and keeping people updated. And hey, here's what we're up to, and here's how you can join. And we're really excited about the work that she's been doing.
That's awesome. Yeah. I'm just like so wowed by like everything you guys are saying, you know. Do you guys have like any pictures that like like of you guys holding on?
Yeah.
Lots of maybe we could share those on like our newsletter when we put this up. I feel like that would be really cool, so everybody can actually see, not just who they're listening to right now, but like just to see how much work it takes to do the work that you guys are doing. It's a lot, and I feel like that also opens up that whole like idea of why we do the work, right? And I feel like majority of the time it's that idea of like what you said earlier is like stewarding the land and then building that relationship. But I'm curious, like how early on did you guys know you guys wanted to like do work like this, or like has it been, what's the relationship with the land you guys have been having throughout the years?
So for me, I've always like loved nature and animals, but I did not know what I wanted to do in life until the Basins of Relations program. I was working at Target before. Rafa, Rafa used to work at Target with me.
Definitely.
So before, I just knew like that I wanted to do something different and not be stuck indoors. And then so I was going to school at the time too, aside from working at Target, and I was studying biology because I also really love like science and stuff. And I was taking art classes, and then one day I was like on Nextdoor and I seen, apply now to the Basins of Relations, and I was like, like I clicked it and I was like, I've been living in Richmond since I was 3 and I've never heard of Urban Tilth, and like I just like everything that they said, I was like, oh wow, like that sounds cool. And yeah, I didn't know what a watershed was either. Like I didn't learn that in school. It was like different education out here.
Yeah.
So yeah, that during the program, I was like, wow, like I was just like, this is what I want to do. I didn't even care about anything else. I was like, I want to work outdoors and I want to help the land and be surrounded by nature. And yeah, so when I took the program, that was like, boom.
Yeah. Very eye-opening.
Yeah, and then after that, I told everybody. I was telling Rafa when I was doing the I was like, oh my God, you need to go see Urban Tilth. And then, so I always like made sure that like at least the people that I knew, they had to know about what Urban Tilth was doing, and just always like spreading the events that were going on and all of that. I was all like, dude, this is like actually changing the community that like I grew up in. Like, yeah, back in the early 2000s, Richmond was kind of crazy. So like I've been able to see like the difference that like these like local orgs have had in Richmond, and
yeah, that's eye-opening.
Yeah,
like just getting into it, just because like like you said earlier, Nathan, like it's a calling that we have to be out there, But
yeah, for me, I've definitely always had a connection to nature, like from even when I can't remember. When I was a baby, like my parents would put me in a little backpack or whatever you call it and throw me on their chest or their back and go on hikes, Joaquin Miller through the redwoods, and just so I was always exposed to that stuff, and I feel like it's just embedded in me. So I've always had that love. And like even in high school, I went to Berkeley High. I was a part of the Green Academy so like all of our classes are kind of subtly focused on sustainability and shifting towards like a more green planet. And then going to college, I went to UC Santa Cruz, and I wanted to study marine biology because I have like a huge love for fish and water and all these things related to water. That didn't really work out, but I ended up being an environmental studies major, which I feel like actually kind of more encompass like pretty much what this work does. Like it's related to the environment, but it's also related to people, and it's also related to relationships and the connection between the two. And then like once you graduate college, it's like, yeah, you kind of know what you're interested in, like what you're passionate about, but then that doesn't always translate to a job. So I was kind of in that dilemma, and I moved to Richmond to live with my grandpa because he has space in his house, and I didn't have any money, so I moved in with him, and he's been here my whole life. So I was kind of searching for a job, and my mom stumbled upon Urban Tilth and told me about this Basins of Relations training program. It was like, this would be super cool for you. And I went in and talked to the lady at the desk at the time. I can't remember her name. Miss Kim. Shout out Miss Kim. Yeah, she was so sweet. And yeah, I just felt like it was like the perfect fit for me and a great opportunity to connect with a community that I wasn't really familiar with. Like, I had always just come to visit my grandpa, and that was basically it. I wasn't really too familiar with what was going on in Richmond, but I had a love for nature, I had a love for water, and I was in Richmond, so that was like a way for me to give to the community and kind of connect myself. And through the work, I've learned so much of the history and met so many people. And yeah, it's like the most fulfilling work to be able to give back to the community and to the earth. So, yeah, it was a long journey here. It was probably a little bit of luck finding this job instead of ending up at Target or somewhere else. But, yeah, just certainly blessed to have this opportunity.
Definitely.
Yeah. Also mentioned Solwazi and Paola did the Basins of Relations training program, and now they help lead that program and have led our SAP Summer Apprentice Program Watersheds edition for the last couple of years. So they've like become the people doing the training, which is
Class of 2019.
Basis of Relations. Yeah, I definitely, similar, like, have always really felt connected to the natural world and to creeks in particular. Like, definitely, like, took the long way home from school, walking home from school or something to, like, check on the creek or whatever in the neighborhood that I grew up in. But I think really, like, in going to, managed to, like, just get lucky with met some good people. And I was, like, in school and stuff who, like, sort of let me know about, like, environmental injustice and sort of broaden my perspective of, like, that, like, caring for the environment is cool. And also here's this intersection with how it relates to social justice and, just like the way that these beautiful, amazing natural resources are distributed is not fair or even, like has the kind of scars of all the other elements of, like, the issues of American society, and yeah, I originally started, and so I think I've always been interested in sort of that intersection of creek restoration and environmental justice and social justice, and been really lucky to get to, like, grow the way that works in Richmond over the last 10 years or so. I find that, like, every year that I have been doing this work, that it's more meaningful to me over time. Like increasingly it feels more needed and more essential and, like, more what we need to, like, kind of heal us collectively when I need to heal myself personally, this, like, relationship to land. And so I think I feel so lucky to have to work with these folks and to be a part of it. And because it's so, I think, just as I learn more about myself and the world, it's like, it just feels all the more essential and more like this is what we need to, like, heal kind of climate crisis and mental health, challenges we experience as a society, and so many of these things, and it feels more important with each year to me.
Yeah, I feel like that's something that I've noticed in, like, a lot of youth right now, or I wouldn't be even considered youth anymore. 26, so dang. But I feel like a lot of a lot of people around our age are like itching to get out, like out in nature and just like do work. And you know, it doesn't even have to be work. It could literally, by work I also mean like mental health. And you know, so I do think that like even for me, like Paola said earlier, like I met her when we were working at Target, literally same department. And I felt that need to like, you know, I need to do something with myself, you know. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to because my father had passed away. And there's a lot of things that went into it to where I stopped going to school and I had to work at warehouses. I spent like 3 years working at a glass company that's out in San Francisco and just doing routes, delivering up to Eureka and seeing all those beautiful trees. I was just like, I just want to pull over right now and just, you know, walk around. And, you know, I feel like that was a really big wake up for me, like realizing how much I wanted to be outdoors. And I remember hitting up Paola. I'd be like, hey, do you guys have any more positions like at Urban Tilth? You know, and I just kept refreshing, looking every single day. I had quit my job. Like, I was just like, I can't do this anymore. I was unemployed for a whole month, a month and a half. And, you know, just trying to get a job that was not warehouse related. And, you know, just looking at nonprofits that focus on activism and, you know, advocating for clean air. And I stumbled across the Just Transition application, and I thought that was like the coolest thing ever. And I applied, and yeah, I feel very grateful just because that month and a half was scary, you know, not having, you know, just enough for bills and getting by, but definitely getting the job was a great opportunity, and I get to meet people like you guys, you know, which is amazing. Yeah. But yeah, like definitely I always see like a shared want to like be out there and helping out and restoring not just nature but also like communities and relationships between, you know, people. And I admire that a lot within, you know, our community right now. Yeah.
I mean, UT's lucky to have you and Kiara, and I feel like I can't believe you found. I feel like we must. I always assume we made the Just Transition team for y'all, as opposed to you finding an application or something. But yeah, I mean, not to get too like existential or whatever, but like I feel like there's so much work and so much like elements of just like being a human alive in 2025, like being on social media or whatever. You know, it's like so much of like modern existence that just makes us feel kind of like small and powerless and disembodied and like alone and distant and yeah, I think we all really crave work that makes us feel like part of something bigger and connects us with other people and like with like a more than human community, you know, the trees and the plants and the animals and the fish and all that good stuff. And I think there's a real craving for that, I think, even and yeah, it's hard to find it. I think I feel lucky too.
Yeah, I'd shared our we do our little Watershed crew update on Instagram, and I posted on my story, and someone like commented like, thank you for this like just little break in the rest of my feed, just like all this chaos and negativity that's going on, and because of like the inauguration and the fires and just all this stuff, and so just sharing that work was like just a little mental health break for that person. And I thought that was cool. And that's kind of what it is for me every day. Like I can just go to work and get away from everything else and like know that what I'm doing is positive and I can feel good about it. And I can sleep good at night. I don't have to feel bad about my work. And just, shout out to Urban Tilth for like just allowing all of us to have the space to dream and fight for their what we believe in and the justice that we believe we deserve and we do deserve, and this just transition that we're trying to go through. So we may not be getting rich, but we're getting by. Like, it is possible to do meaningful, impactful work and make enough money to live a solid life. So I'm grateful for that. I'm glad that's becoming more and more possible.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I also feel like right now, like what you said, we're trying to get into that just transition, and one of the main focuses is how can we make our communities more livable, right? Like, and financially, like, it's kind of hard to live in the Bay Area, find a place for yourself, or if, a family even, also just speaking from experience, living in homeless shelters, I feel like it is definitely something that, like, I'm happy that I can contribute to opening ideas into, like, how can we make things more affordable while we're also carrying on very meaningful work, not extractive work, and how that just naturally coexists with building community, So it's really cool that, like, literally it doesn't matter what you're doing in the fight for a better future, all of these things still coexist. So it's beautiful because Urban Tilth, like, embodies that pretty well. Yeah. And I saw on social media you guys did, like, a controlled burning. Just this is kind of like more of a question that, like, I was itching to, like, ask, and I completely forgot right now. But how was that, like, controlled burning?
Yeah, so we went to this workshop at Pepperwood Preserve. It's like Sonoma, I believe, and it was a pile burning workshop. So there's, like, pile burning, and then there's broadcast burning, and there's all different ways to use fire, but this was specifically focused on pile burning. So we've been talking about for a while just wanting to grow our relationship to fire and see how that might take some space in our work and be able to help us reach our goals. And there's just so much knowledge in fire. It's like ancient. It's an ancient element that's been used for years and years. The native people of this land, the Ohlone people, have used fire so much to shape the landscape and keep things healthy. And I think just because of some of the wildfires that we've seen in recent years, like, people have this fear of fire, and it's like a warranted fear. Like, obviously those things are scary, but those things are also a product of us not using fire for a long time and all this built up fuel. And so we wanted to go to this workshop to learn how to use fire properly, to get more comfortable with fire. And it was just really eye-opening for me because, you innately just have this kind of fear in your stomach about fire and what could go wrong. And, like, is it as simple as they make it look? But it really was as simple as they make it look. Like, you build these piles of wood. So you could be a homeowner with excess fuel around your property, or you could be working in a wildland space and you want to clear out some dead branches or whatever the case may be. And so you build up these piles and you do a little maintenance to, like, clear the area around it. You get your permits, you check your humidity and your weather and your wind, and you just do your due diligence on checking all those things beforehand, and then it really just goes smoothly. Like, you light it and you let it do its thing, and then you check it for some days after to make sure it doesn't flare back up. And so hopefully somewhere down the line we can start to use fire in our work. That would be really amazing for me. And it's kind of just this duality between the water and the fire and the earth, and it's like all these elements are connected and they need each other to flourish. And a lot of the California native plants are have evolved to need fire to help them grow and spread seed and all these things. So that was an amazing experience for sure.
Wow. Yeah, we had an episode last year when we talked about wildfires in California, and just what you said, Solwazi, about like being scared of it, being scared of fires, while like back in the day when the original people from here, the indigenous people from here, practiced controlled burnings, and it was part of stewarding, right? And I feel like right now, like thinking, like one of the things we said was like fire bad, and then we start thinking water's good, and then water can be bad too, like getting floods and sea level rising, all of these elements are like we can't control them 100%, but they do play a role in what needs to happen, and it would be definitely one of the coolest things to see Watershed, do some controlled burning.
For sure.
Yeah. Get in our avatar bag. Like.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to add?
Yeah. I just thought it was like also really cool. Like I was scared of fire. I've always like had a thing with fire, and so like the experience was really like also eye opening that we were like we got to like burn our little pile by ourselves, like start the fire, and then like watch it, and then just like come back and check on it, and then turn it off. And yeah, it was really cool. And then just knowing about all the benefits that like the carbon, what was it called?
Yeah, the carbon
like
and the biochar.
Yeah, the biochar, like all the nutrients that it like adds to the soil, and then like it really like brings like healthy soil back. So it's like you get rid of like invasive grasses or invasive plants that were there, and then maybe the seeds that from like native plants that like have been suppressed, like they have a chance to like come out. So it was like really cool to learn like all those like things. And so anyways, now I feel like we could do fire and we could be Avatar.
Yeah.
We also got to learn a little bit from these folks from Audubon Canyon Ranch last year, and they work with this Good Fire Alliance, and the one thing that was crazy to me was just the scale of fire that California's adapted to, and basically like all these plants and animals that co-evolved with humans and with these indigenous communities, and that the indigenous communities, like, I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but yeah, like there, like millions of acres of land that was being burned in these very controlled and low scale ways, and for thousands of years, and that's what the landscape is adapted to, and like you all are saying, like the problem isn't that we have fire at all, it's that we have these kind of boom and bust, we suppress it, and then it explodes, and it's uncontrollable, and obviously climate change has something to do with that too, but yeah, that was crazy to me just to hear about, like, this wasn't like, this was like there was a fire season sort of in pre-colonial times as well, but it was just really thoughtful and controlled, and part of this, like part of the cycles of the year, to bring nutrients back to the soil to help make space for new growth, and really beautiful thing.
We learned about these like fire intervals, basically, like for these different ecosystems, just how frequently they need fire. And it was like for certain ecosystems it's like a very short time period that they need the fire to be cycling through, which just goes to show the need for that thing. And like certain trees like pine, where their seeds literally won't open unless there's fire.
Wow.
And so that's like the signal to those species to do their thing. So, yeah, and then kind of with our modern civilization, like we've kind of starved the land of fire for like so many years, just like well beyond those fire intervals, and that's why you're seeing these massive fires that are spreading, just going rampant, because there's all this built up fuel from so many years of fire starvation.
Yeah.
And a lot of invasive plants are like highly flammable, and like we have a lot of them, so it's like it adds to the fire. It's like you have a eucalyptus.
Oh yeah.
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 And these invasive grasses also just like covering all of our hillsides. That stuff is what helps like spread these fires across long distances, just these huge fields of invasive grasses.
Wow. That's a lot. That's a lot to take in when it comes to learning about controlled fires. You know, and I'm pretty sure that it goes even deeper than that, you know.
Oh yeah.
But yeah. It does look like we're getting close to time. But yeah, I wanted to take this time right now to just open it up for the Watershed program to see if you guys have anything you guys want to uplift, the events that you guys have coming up, or any youth opportunities, you know.
Yeah. Well, I feel like one thing I want to shout out is our water conservation team that is also part of the Watersheds program. And we do this, creek restoration work, watershed restoration work, and that is sort of part of it, and also a little bit independent. This water conservation team is doing these as part of this big TCC grant. They're doing these water conservation installs for Iron Triangle homeowners in particular for free. So if anyone's listening, lives in the Iron Triangle, wants to get a free, water saving system, we're doing laundry to landscape gray water recycling system. So taking the water from your washing machine and irrigating your yard, which is you can do if you use the right type of soap and irrigate the right type of plants. But and then doing some drip irrigation systems like water efficiency improvements. So that's a cool thing that people can reach out to us if you send an email to waterconservation@urbantilth.org if you're interested. We also have a big event series coming up to talk about green infrastructure specifically in that same neighborhood, in the Iron Triangle neighborhood, trying to get people involved in the design and understanding and ultimately the care for these kind of green infrastructure spaces, so bioswales and rain gardens and things in the Iron Triangle neighborhood. You can reach out to that same email, waterconservation@urbantilth.org, if folks are interested in that. And then we'll have our summer apprentice program in the summer that's really good for youth like 14 to 19. I think Solwazi is going to be leading this year our Watersheds edition of that summer apprentice program. And then we have the Basins of Relations training program in the fall, which is an apprenticeship, and that's usually for young adults, like 18 to 25. Not exclusively those age ranges, but that's often like folks who are kind of starting out in their careers and interested in doing careers that are supportive of environmental health. So applications for that go out in the summer, and then that program is in the fall. It's kind of like a semester long, like September to December in the fall. But all those paid training programs for young folks from West County. Those are my things. I don't know. Do you have anything else you guys want to uplift?
Or just any shout outs to your crew or
Shout out everybody in the crew. Shout out Marlo, the oldest, the OG. Leo, Carla, Catherine, Kave, Angie,
Cyrus, Jonah grows our plants.
Jonah, Cheryl.
And shout out Jesse. Shout out Erica.
The
shout
OGs,
out Alu. The former crew.
That's
still out here doing their thing. Luis. And probably people before me who I don't know. We've had lots of Lucas. Lots of amazing people come through the program. Do super cool work. Shout out Nathan.
Holler
for dreaming.
For sure.
Definitely shout out to the three of you guys for coming onto the podcast and sharing the knowledge you guys do, or the knowledge that you guys have for the land that we're at, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's great work that you guys are doing, and it doesn't go unseen. And I think that's why we really wanted with the Watershed to be like the first episode, just because it's such a, I don't know, I feel like nobody focuses on it, you know, like, and I wanted to know a lot more. So yeah, definitely. And I think the listeners are going to be very happy with this episode.
Yeah. We're
Thanks for having us.
honored to be here. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Of course. But yeah, this is it.
Signing off.
Adios. Bye, everybody. Thank you for tuning in.
Over and out.